The massive alien ship descended through Earth's atmosphere on a cold December morning. It moved slowly, almost carefully, as if the beings inside wanted everyone to see them coming. The ship was silver and shaped like a teardrop, stretching nearly 2 miles from end to end. It cast a shadow over New York City that made people stop in the streets and look up with a mixture of fear and wonder. Admiral Kevin Grant stood on the roof of the United Nations headquarters. Watching the ship settle into a hover position above the East River, he was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. But he had never seen anything like this. No human had. Beside him stood Dr. Laura Mitchell, a young scientist who had spent her entire career searching for signs of alien life. Her hands were shaking as she held her tablet, recording everything. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl. Now that it was here, she felt more afraid than excited. "They're opening something," Laura said, pointing at the ship. A section of the hull slid apart, and a smaller craft emerged. It floated down toward the United Nations Plaza, where a landing area had been hastily prepared. Security forces from a dozen nations surrounded the area. Everyone knew their weapons would be useless if the aliens meant harm. The smaller craft landed without a sound. A ramp extended from its side, and then they appeared. The first alien was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. It wore flowing robes of silver and gold that seemed to shimmer with their own light. Behind it came others, 12 in total, each one different from the last. Some had scales, others had fur. One appeared to be made entirely of crystal. They moved with a grace that suggested they were used to being watched and admired. Kevin walked down to meet them. Laura closed behind. Secretary General Maria Santos joined them at the bottom of the stairs. She was a small woman with dark hair and sharp eyes, chosen to lead the human delegation because of her reputation for staying calm under pressure. The tall blue alien stepped forward and raised one long-fingered hand in greeting. When it spoke, the words came out as a series of musical tones, but a device around its neck translated them instantly into English. "I am Ambassador Vexus of the Karathi species. I speak for the Galactic Council, the governing body of all civilized worlds in this region of space. We have been watching your species for some time, and we have decided that you are ready to join the greater community of the galaxy." Maria stepped forward and bowed her head slightly. "I am Maria Santos, Secretary General of the United Nations. I speak for the nations of Earth. We are honored by your visit." Vexus tilted his head in a way that seemed almost bird-like. "You should be more than honored. You should be grateful. The Council rarely extends invitations to species so young. Most must wait centuries before they are considered worthy. But humans have shown potential." Kevin did not like the way Vexus said that word. It sounded less like a compliment and more like an evaluation. Over the next 3 days, the aliens presented their offer in a series of formal meetings. Laura attended each one, taking notes and asking questions whenever she was allowed. The Council's proposal was detailed and comprehensive. Humanity would become a provisional member of the Galactic Council. This meant they would have access to advanced technology that could cure diseases, end hunger, and allow travel between stars in days instead of years. They would be able to trade with thousands of alien species. They would be protected from hostile civilizations that might otherwise destroy them. In exchange, humanity would give up 30% of its military forces. These soldiers and ships would serve in the Council's peacekeeping fleet following orders from Council commanders. Earth would also surrender control of the outer parts of its solar system, beyond the orbit of Mars. The Council would use these areas for mining and other resource gathering. Finally, a Council governor would be assigned to Earth to oversee the transition and ensure humanity followed all Council laws and customs. "It is a generous offer," Vexus said at the end of the 3rd day. "Most species accept immediately. They understand that the benefits far outweigh the costs." Maria sat quietly for a long moment. Kevin watched her face, trying to read her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "We appreciate the Council's consideration. However, this is a decision that affects every person on Earth. We will need time to discuss it among ourselves before we can give you an answer." Vexus's large dark eyes blinked slowly, Time, this is not a negotiation, Secretary General. This is an invitation. An offer of friendship and protection. One does not deliberate on such things. Perhaps that is how other species do it, Maria replied, her voice calm but firm. But humanity makes important decisions together. We will give you our answer in 1 week. The aliens seemed confused by this response. They looked at each other, their various faces and features expressing emotions that Laura could not quite read. But she saw something in Vexus's eyes that looked almost like worry. Very well, the ambassador said finally. 1 week. But I urge you not to take this lightly. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and the Council's protection is worth any price. The week that followed was the most intense in human history. Every government held emergency sessions. Every news channel talked about nothing else. Ordinary people argued in restaurants and living rooms about what humanity should do. Some said they should accept the offer. The technology alone would save millions of lives. The protection would ensure humanity's survival. What did it matter if they had to give up some soldiers and some empty space rocks? Others disagreed strongly. They said humanity had spent its entire history fighting for freedom. Their ancestors had died in wars against tyrants and empires. They would not surrender their independence now. Not to anyone. No matter how advanced, Kevin spent the week meeting with military leaders from around the world. They studied everything they knew about Council technology and tactics. The conclusion was sobering. If it came to a fight, humanity would lose. They were simply too far behind. But losing a fight and surrendering, without one, were two different things. When the week ended, Maria Santos stood before the assembled alien delegation in the main hall of the United Nations. Kevin was at her side, along with representatives from every nation on Earth. The room was silent except for the soft hum of alien equipment. The people of Earth have reached a decision, Maria announced. Her voice was steady, but Kevin could see the tension in her shoulders. We are grateful for the Council's offer. We recognize the benefits it would bring, but we must respectfully decline. The silence that followed was so complete that Kevin could hear his own heartbeat. Vexus stared at Maria as if she had spoken in a language he could not understand. Refuse? The ambassador said at last. We do, Maria confirmed. We will not surrender our sovereignty. We will not give up control of our territory. And we will not place our people under foreign command. If the Council wishes to trade with us, to share knowledge and culture, we welcome that. But we will not become servants, no matter how kindly the masters might treat us. Vexus stood frozen for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the hall. The other aliens followed, their faces showing expressions that needed no translation. They were afraid. The council chamber was the largest room Ambassador Vexus had ever seen. It floated in space, built into a station that orbited the Karathi homeworld. The ceiling was made of transparent crystal, showing the stars in all their glory. Thousands of seats arranged in a great circle faced the center, where speakers would stand to address the assembled representatives of 100 different species. Today, those seats were filled with worried faces. Vexus stood in the center, feeling very small despite his height. High Counselor Zethric sat in the largest seat, reserved for the most powerful member of the council. He was ancient, nearly 1,000 years old, his massive gray body covered in thick plates of natural armor. His species, the Vothani, had been founding members of the council. They had helped write the laws that governed the galaxy, and right now, Zethric looked like someone had just told him the stars were going out. They refused, Zethric said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. In 3,000 years of council history, no species has ever refused our offer of membership. Not one. Vexus bowed his head. I delivered the offer exactly as instructed. I explained the benefits clearly. I warned them of the dangers. They understood everything perfectly. They simply chose to say no. Murmurs spread through the chamber like waves on water. Counselor Meredith, who came from a species that lived in the deep oceans of their world, made a bubbling sound that the translation systems turned into words. This is impossible. Young species do not refuse the council. They are too afraid, too eager for our technology and protection. What makes these humans different? That is what I have been trying to understand, Vexus replied. They are not like other young species. They do not seem to understand fear the way others do. When I warned them about the dangers of space, they did not become frightened. They became determined, as if the danger made them more certain of their choice, not less. A clicking sound came from the section where the Manthuri representatives sat. Their speaker, a young female named Kira, rose to her feet. Her insectoid body was covered in hard green shell, and her large compound eyes reflected the starlight from above. The protocols are clear, Kira said. Species that refuse membership are to be contained. Their space travel must be restricted. Their technology must be limited. They cannot be allowed to spread and possibly threaten Council interests in the future. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew about the containment protocols. They had been used many times before, always against primitive species who refused the Council out of ignorance. The contained species were not destroyed, but they were effectively imprisoned on their homeworlds. Watched forever by Council patrols, Zethryx shifted his massive body, and the sound echoed through the silent chamber. The containment protocols may not be appropriate here. Why not? Demanded Counselor Thrain, a reptilian being with sharp teeth and a quick temper. The humans are nothing special. Their technology is primitive. Their military is weak. We could contain them in a matter of days, could we? Zethryx asked quietly. Admiral Torvis, please share your assessment. A Karathi military officer stepped forward. He was older than Vexus, with scars on his blue skin that spoke of many battles. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had studied war his entire life. I have been analyzing human history since we first made contact, Torvis began. What I have found disturbs me. The humans have been a spacefaring species for only 2 centuries. In that time, they have colonized 3 star systems and built a fleet of nearly 40 warships. Their technology is crude compared to ours, but it is advancing at a rate we have never seen in any other species. All the more reason to contain them now, Thrain interrupted. Torvis shook his head. You do not understand. The humans are not just fast learners. They are fighters. Their history is filled with wars, but not just wars of conquest. They fight for ideas, for freedom, for the right to make their own choices. They fight even when they know they will lose. They fight until the very end, and sometimes they win battles that should have been impossible. He paused, letting his words sink in. If we attempt to contain them, they will resist. And if we underestimate them, we may create an enemy more dangerous than any we have faced before. Counselor Meredith made another bubbling sound. What do you suggest? That we simply let them refuse? That we show the entire galaxy that the Council can be told no? No, Zethryx said, his voice heavy with thought. We cannot allow that. But perhaps there is a middle path. Vexus, you spoke with the humans directly. What do they actually want? Vexus thought carefully before answering. They want what they have always had. Control over their own fate. They do not wish to be enemies of the Council. They expressed interest in trade and cooperation, but they will not accept any arrangement that makes them subordinate to us. That is unacceptable, Thrain said. Every member species accepts Council authority. It is the foundation of everything we have built. Then perhaps, Torvis said quietly, we need to ask ourselves why that is the foundation. And whether it must remain so forever. The chamber erupted in arguments. Species that had been Council members for millennia insisted that the old ways must be preserved. Younger species, those who had joined more recently, seemed uncertain. A few even suggested that the humans might have a point. Zethryx raised one massive arm, and the chamber fell silent. We will not make a decision today, the High Counselor announced. This matter requires more thought than we have given it. In the meantime, I am authorizing a show of force. We will send a fleet to human space, not to attack, but to remind them of our power. Perhaps when they see what they face, they will reconsider their refusal. And if they do not, Kira asked. Zethryx was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was tired. Then we will have to decide whether we are willing to destroy something rare and precious simply because it refuses to obey us." The meeting ended, but Vexus remained in the center of the chamber long after the others had left. He looked up at the stars through the crystal ceiling and thought about the humans. He had spent years studying species across the galaxy. He had seen civilizations rise and fall. He had watched young species eagerly accept council membership, trading their freedom for safety and technology. Most of them eventually became productive members of galactic society, but none of them had ever seemed truly happy. They followed orders. They paid their taxes. They contributed their soldiers to council fleets. And slowly, over generations, they forgot what it meant to choose their own path. The humans remembered. That was what made them different. That was what made them dangerous, and that Vexus admitted to himself was what made him admire them. He thought about Dr. Laura Mitchell, the human scientist who had asked him endless questions during his visit to Earth. She had wanted to understand everything about the council, not to obey it, but to learn. She had looked at him not with fear or submission, but with curiosity and a strange kind of confidence. "We will face the danger on our own terms," Admiral Grant had said. "As we always have." Vexus wondered if that was courage or madness. Perhaps he thought it was both. Perhaps that was what the humans had that no other species did. The willingness to face impossible odds, not because they expected to win, but because surrender was simply not something they could accept. The fleet would be sent. The humans would see council power displayed before them, and Vexus already knew with a certainty that troubled him deeply, that it would not change their answer. The humans would not bow, and the galaxy would never be the same. The council fleet arrived 6 months after humanity's refusal. 200 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of Mars, their hulls gleaming with technologies that human scientists could barely understand. They spread out in a great arc, forming a wall of metal and energy between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. Admiral Kevin Grant watched them from the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's largest warship. It was a vessel he had helped design, built in the orbital shipyards above Earth over the course of 15 years. He had thought it was impressive when it launched. Now, looking at the alien armada before him, it seemed very small. Commander Lisa Park stood beside him, studying the tactical display. She was young for her position, barely 40 years old. But Kevin had chosen her as his second-in-command because she had something rare. She did not panic. 200 ships, Lisa said quietly. "We have 37. Kevin nodded slowly. He had known the numbers would be bad. He had prepared himself for this moment ever since Maria Santos announced humanity's refusal. But preparing for something and facing it were very different things. "Show me what we know about their formation," he said. Lisa worked the controls, and the display changed to show the disposition of the alien fleet. Each ship was marked with an icon indicating its class and estimated weapons. The information was incomplete. Based on long-range scans and the limited intelligence they had gathered during the Council's visit to Earth, Kevin studied the display for a long time. Something about it bothered him, but he could not immediately say what. "They're spread thin," he said finally. "Look at the gaps between their ships. If this was a battle formation, those gaps would be weaknesses. Easy places for us to punch through." "Maybe they don't expect us to fight," Lisa suggested. "That's exactly what I think. This is a blockade formation, not an assault formation. They're trying to trap us, not destroy us." Before he could say more, the communications officer spoke up. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Council flagship. Ambassador Vexus wishes to speak with you." Kevin straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put him through." The main view screen flickered and Vexus appeared. The alien ambassador looked different than Kevin remembered. Tired, perhaps. Strained. The confidence he had shown during his visit to Earth seemed diminished. Admiral Grant Vexus began. "I come before you today not with threats, but with a revised offer. The Council has reconsidered its position. We are prepared to reduce our demands significantly." Kevin raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "We ask only for access to your outer solar system for resource surveys," Vexus continued. "No permanent bases, no territorial claims. Just the right to study and catalog what is there. In exchange for this small concession, humanity will receive full membership privileges, access to our technology, trade rights with all council species, protection from external threats. And the military contribution? Kevin asked. The council governor, reduced to a token force, 100 soldiers, serving in ceremonial positions. And no governor. Instead, an ambassador with no authority over Earth's internal affairs. It was a remarkable retreat from the original offer. Kevin could see Lisa's eyes widen slightly at the terms. 6 months ago, they would have seemed generous beyond belief. But Kevin had learned something during those 6 months. He had studied the Council's history, its methods, its true nature. He had spoken with Laura Mitchell about her analysis of alien psychology and culture. He understood now what the Council really was. The answer is still no, Kevin said. Vex's face showed genuine shock. Admiral, please. You must understand what you are refusing. The token force today becomes a larger force tomorrow. The surveys become mining operations. The end colonies. I have seen it happen with other species. The Council takes what it wants, just slowly. It is patient. Very patient. But the end result is always the same. Complete control. And why should we accept any part of the offer? Kevin asked. Because the alternative is worse. Vexus leaned forward, and there was something like desperation in his eyes. Admiral, there are things in this galaxy that you cannot imagine. Threats that have destroyed civilizations far older and more powerful than humanity. The Council exists to protect against these threats. Without that protection, your species will not survive. Kevin was silent for a long moment. He thought about his children, grown now and raising families of their own. He thought about the billions of people on Earth, going about their lives, trusting their leaders to keep them safe. He thought about all the generations yet to come, all the futures that might never exist if he made the wrong choice.
Ow.
What threats? He asked finally. Vexus hesitated. I am not authorized to share that information with NAN members, and we have nothing more to discuss. Kevin reached for the control to end the transmission, but Vexus spoke quickly. Wait, please. I will tell you what I can, even though it may cost me my position. There is a species, very far from here, in the outer reaches of the galaxy. We call them the Devourers. They consume everything in their path. Entire worlds, entire star systems. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be stopped by any weapon we possess. The only defense is to remain hidden, to stay within the protected zones that the Council maintains. And you think humanity would be safer under your protection? I think humanity would survive. On your own, you will eventually attract their attention. And when you do, nothing will save you. Kevin considered this information carefully. If Vexus was telling the truth, it changed everything. But if he was lying, using fear to manipulate humanity into submission, then giving in would be exactly what the Council wanted. He made his decision. Thank you for the warning, Ambassador. We will take it under advisement. But our answer remains unchanged. Humanity will face whatever comes on our own terms. We will not trade our freedom for the promise of safety, especially when that promise comes from those who have already shown they do not respect our right to choose our own path. Vexus stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, the alien ambassador bowed his head. I understand, Admiral. I do not agree with your choice, but I understand it. I will convey your response to the Council. The transmission ended. Lisa turned to Kevin, her expression uncertain. Sir, what if he's telling the truth about these Devourers? Kevin looked out at the alien fleet, still holding its position beyond Mars. Then we'll deal with them when the time comes. But we'll deal with them as free people, Commander. Not as subjects who traded their independence for a comfortable cage. The standoff continued for 3 weeks. Neither side fired a shot. Human ships held their positions, refusing to be intimidated. Council ships maintained their blockade, but made no aggressive moves. And then, one morning, the alien fleet began to withdraw. They did not announce their departure. They simply turned and accelerated away from the solar system. disappearing into faster-than-light travel one by one, till the sky was empty. Kevin watched the last ship vanish and allowed himself a small smile. "Sir?" Lisa asked. "What does this mean?" "It means they blinked first," Kevin replied. "But this isn't over. Not by a long way. Get me Secretary General Santos. We need to start preparing for whatever comes next."
No.
Because something would come next. Kevin was certain of it. The council had shown weakness, and somewhere out there, something was watching. Something hungry. The Devourers were real. Kevin knew it in his bones, and humanity needed to be ready. 2 years after the standoff, the galaxy learned that Ambassador Vexus had been telling the truth. The Devourers came from the Outer Rim. From regions of space so distant that even the Council's long-range sensors had never fully mapped them, they moved in a great swarm, billions of individual creatures traveling together like a single massive organism. Each creature was a living ship, grown rather than built, with hulls made of hardened organic matter and weapons that fired concentrated biological acids, capable of eating through any known metal. The first system to fall was called Caritha. It was home to a peaceful species that had been council members for nearly 1,000 years. They had no military of their own, having relied on council protection for generations. When the Devourers arrived, they sent messages begging for help. The council responded with the largest fleet ever assembled. 300 warships from a dozen different species gathered at Caritha, ready to defend their allies and demonstrate the power that had kept the galaxy safe for millennia. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, 260 council ships were destroyed. The survivors fled in all directions, their crews traumatized by what they had witnessed. The Devourers did not pursue them. They did not need to. They simply descended on Caritha and began to feed. Within a week, the planet was dead. Every plant, every animal, every microscopic organism had been consumed. The Devourers stripped the world bare, leaving nothing but rock and dust. Then they moved on, heading deeper into council space, hungry for more. On Earth, Dr. Laura Mitchell worked around the clock, analyzing every scrap of information about the attack. She had been given access to classified council databases as part of a new agreement between humanity and the surviving council leadership. The old rules no longer mattered. Everyone was too scared to worry about who was a member and who was not. Laura presented her findings at an emergency session of the United Nations. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation, all of them waiting to hear what she had learned. "The Devourers are not intelligent in the way we understand intelligence," Laura began. Her voice was steady despite her exhaustion. She had barely slept in days. "They do not have individual thoughts or goals. They operate on pure instinct, driven by a single overwhelming need to consume organic matter." She changed the display to show a map of the galaxy, with the Devourer's path marked in red. "This is how they move. They always travel toward the highest concentration of biomass. They can sense it somehow, across vast distances of space. When they finish consuming one system, they move to the next, always hungry, never satisfied." Secretary General Maria Santos leaned forward. "Can they be stopped?" "Not by conventional weapons." The council tried. "Their ships are designed for warfare between intelligent species, for battles where strategy and tactics matter. But the Devourers don't fight battles. They don't try to outmaneuver or outthink their enemies. They simply overwhelm them with numbers. For every creature you kill, 1,000 more take its place." The chamber was silent. Every face showed the same expression of fear and despair. Admiral Kevin Grant rose from his seat in the back of the room. He had been listening carefully, thinking about the problem the way he had thought about every problem in his long military career. Not as an impossible obstacle, but as a puzzle to be solved. "You said they can be predicted," he said. "They always move toward the highest concentration of biomass." Laura nodded. "That's correct. Then they can be led. And if they can be led, they can be trapped." A murmur went through the chamber. Maria Santos looked at Kevin with something like hope in her eyes. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" Kevin walked to the front of the chamber, his mind racing with possibilities. We can't beat them in a straight fight. Everyone agrees on that. But what if we didn't try to fight them directly? What if we led them somewhere they couldn't escape from? He turned to Laura. Doctor, is there any environment that the Devourers can't survive in? Laura thought for a moment. They're biological organisms. Extreme conditions would kill them. Intense radiation, extreme gravity, the heart of a star. But how would you get them there? They're not going to fly into a sun voluntarily. No, Kevin agreed. But what if the sun came to them? He pulled up a file on the display. It showed technical diagrams that most of the people in the chamber could not understand. But Laura's eyes widened as she recognized what she was seeing. This is the Collapse Project, she said. I thought it was theoretical. It was... Until 2 years ago, after the standoff with the Council, we started developing it in secret. We wanted a weapon that could defeat an overwhelming enemy. Something that would give us a chance against the Council if they ever decided to stop negotiating and start fighting. The diagrams showed a device that looked almost simple. A sphere covered with complex circuitry, surrounded by a framework of support structures. It creates an artificial singularity, Kevin explained. A controlled collapse of space itself. Anything within range gets pulled in and crushed. We've tested it on asteroids. On small moons, it works. Maria Santos stared at him. Why didn't you tell us about this before? Because we weren't sure we could control it. And because we hoped we would never need to use it? Kevin met her eyes steadily. But now we need it. And I think with enough preparation we can use it to destroy the Devourers once and for all. The plan that emerged over the following weeks was the most ambitious project in human history. It required cooperation between every nation on Earth. Factories that had been building cars, computers were converted to produce the components for the collapse device. Scientists who had spent their careers competing with each other worked together to solve problems that seemed impossible. But the plan also required something else. It required help from the Council. Ambassador Vexus arrived on Earth 3 days after the plan was finalized. He looked even more tired than he had during the standoff. His blue skin pale and his dark eyes haunted by everything he had witnessed. Kevin met him at the landing site. The two of them had been enemies once, or at least opponents. Now they were something else. Allies, perhaps. Partners in desperation. The Council fleet is scattered, Vexus said without preamble. Many of our worlds have been abandoned. The High Counselor is dead, killed defending his homeworld. We have nothing left to offer except our ships and our knowledge. That's enough, Kevin replied. We don't need you to fight for us. We just need you to help us lead the Devourers to where we want them. Vexus studied him for a long moment. You really believe this plan will work? I believe it's our only chance. And I believe that if we work together, humans and Council species side by side, we can pull it off. Kevin extended his hand, the same gesture he had seen in 1,000 movies and 100 ceremonies. A symbol of friendship and trust. We'll help you, Ambassador, he said. Not because you asked, and not because we owe you anything. We'll help because it's the right thing to do. Because those creatures will come for us eventually if we don't stop them now. And because maybe, when this is over, we can figure out a better way for all our species to live together. Vexus looked at the offered hand. He had learned about this human custom during his first visit to Earth. It had seemed strange to him then. Touching a stranger as a sign of trust, but now, standing in the shadow of extinction, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. He took Kevin's hand and shook it. I think I would like that, Admiral, he said. I think I would like that very much. The Battle of the Void was fought in the darkness between galaxies, in a region of space so empty that the nearest star was nothing but a distant point of light. It was a place where nothing lived, where nothing had ever lived. A perfect tomb for creatures that had consumed entire civilizations. Admiral Kevin Grant stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the Allied fleet take up positions. It was the largest force ever assembled in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside Council vessels. Species that had been rivals for centuries worked together toward a single goal. The differences that had once seemed so important now meant nothing. Captain Lisa Park commanded the Resilience, leading a special squadron that would play the most dangerous role in the plan. Her ships were loaded with concentrated biological matter, the same chemical signature that the Devourers used to find their prey. They would be the bait. "All ships report ready," the tactical officer announced. "The chemical dispersal systems are active. We're broadcasting the signal on all frequencies." Kevin nodded. "Begin the operation. Cross the void." Lisa Park's squadron accelerated away from the main fleet. Their engines burned bright against the darkness as they spread the chemical lure behind them like a trail of breadcrumbs. Somewhere in the distance, the Devourers would sense it. They would follow. They always followed. The wait was the hardest part. Minutes stretched into hours. Kevin stood motionless on the bridge, watching the sensors for any sign of the enemy. Around him, his crew worked in tense silence. Everyone knew what was at stake. Dr. Laura Mitchell was on the bridge as well, monitoring the collapsed device that sat at the center of the fleet's formation. It had taken months to build, the combined effort of human and alien engineers working side by side. Now it floated in space, waiting to be activated. "Contact," the sensor officer said suddenly. Multiple contacts. Thousands of them. Coming from bearing 27 Mark V, Kevin looked at the display and felt his heart grow cold. The Devourers were coming. They appeared as a great cloud of red dots, spreading across the screen like a stain. There were so many that the sensors could not count them all. Millions of creatures, perhaps billions, all moving with a single purpose. "Lisa, do you see them?" Kevin asked over the communication link. "I see them, Admiral." Lisa's voice was calm despite the danger. "Beginning evasive maneuvers." Drawing them toward the target zone, her squadron turned and ran, staying just ahead of the Devourer swarm. The creatures pursued them with single-minded hunger, following the chemical trail exactly as Laura had predicted. They were not intelligent enough to suspect a trap. They could not imagine that anything would willingly attract their attention. "They're entering the target zone," the tactical officer reported. "All friendly ships are clear." Kevin turned to Laura. "Is the device ready?" Laura checked her instruments one final time. "Ready, Admiral." "Activation on your command." Kevin watched the display. The Devourers were fully committed now, their entire swarm concentrated in a relatively small volume of space. It was the first time anyone had seen them gathered so closely together. Under other circumstances, it might have been a beautiful sight. All those living ships, moving as one, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. He thought about all the worlds they had consumed, all the lives they had ended, all the civilizations that had been erased as if they had never existed. "Activate the device," he ordered. Laura pressed the control, and the universe changed. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then a point of absolute darkness appeared at the center of the Devourer's swarm. It was small, smaller than a grain of sand, but it was the most powerful thing ever created by intelligent beings. A controlled tear in the fabric of space itself. The darkness began to grow. The Devourers closest to it were pulled in first. They did not understand what was happening. They could not understand. They simply followed their instincts, trying to flee from the danger, but the gravity was too strong. Nothing could escape. More and more of the creatures were drawn into the singularity. They collided with each other in their panic, their organic hulls crumpling and tearing. Some tried to fire their weapons, but the biological acids simply curved back toward the darkness and disappeared. Kevin watched in silence as billions of Devourers were destroyed in a matter of minutes. The swarm that had terrorized the galaxy, that had seemed unstoppable, was being erased from existence. The darkness grew larger and larger, consuming everything in its path. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The singularity collapsed in on itself, vanishing in a flash of light that temporarily blinded every sensor in the fleet. When the light faded, there was nothing left. No Devourers. No swarm. Just empty space and the stunned survivors of the Allied fleet. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, across every communication channel, cheering erupted. Humans and aliens celebrating together, their voices mixing in a chorus of relief and triumph. Kevin allowed himself a small smile. They had done it. Against all odds, they had done it. 6 months later, the Galactic Assembly convened for the first time. It met in the same chamber where the Council had once held absolute power, but everything else was different. The seats were arranged in a circle with no section higher than any other. Every species had an equal voice. Every vote counted the same. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the center, addressing the assembled representatives. Kevin Grant watched from the observer's gallery, retired now, but still serving as an advisor. Laura Mitchell sat beside him, already planning the scientific exchanges that would begin next week. "This assembly will be different from the council that came before," Maria announced. Her voice was strong and clear, carrying to every corner of the chamber. "There will be no demands for subordination, no threats of containment. Every species will be free to determine its own destiny while cooperating with others for the common good." She paused, looking around at the faces watching her. Some were familiar, others strange beyond imagination, but all of them were listening. 2 years ago, humanity refused to join the Galactic Council. We did not refuse because we thought we were better than other species. We refused because we believed that freedom was worth any risk. We believed that the galaxy could be organized on principles of mutual respect rather than hierarchy and control. She smiled slightly. "Some of you thought we were foolish. Some of you thought we were arrogant. And maybe we were a little of both, but we were also right. When the great crisis came, it was not hierarchy that saved us. It was cooperation. It was trust. It was the willingness of different species to work together as equals toward a common goal." In the observer's gallery, Laura leaned close to Kevin. "Do you think this will work? This new assembly?" Kevin watched Maria continue her speech, watched the representatives from 100 different species listening with attention and hope. He thought about all the challenges that lay ahead. Building trust would take time. Old rivalries would not disappear overnight. There would be arguments and disagreements, and probably a few crises along the way. Probably not perfectly, he admitted. Nothing involving people ever does. Human or alien. We're all too complicated, too proud, too stubborn. He paused, watching as Ambassador Vexus rose to second Maria's motion for the new assembly charter. The Karathi diplomat, who had once tried to pressure humanity into submission, was now one of their strongest allies. "But it's a start," Kevin continued. "A good start, and that's all you can ever really ask for. A chance to do better than you did before. A chance to build something worth building." Outside the chamber's crystal walls, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 suns. Somewhere out there, new discoveries waited to be made. New friendships waited to be formed. A galaxy that had spent millennia, under the rule of a small group of powerful species, was finally opening up to something new. It would not be easy. It would not be perfect. But it would be free, and that, Kevin thought, was worth everything. Laura smiled and took his hand. "Ready to go home, Admiral?" Kevin looked one last time at the assembly below, at the representatives of so many different species, finally treating each other as equals. He thought about Earth, about his family, about the future that his grandchildren would inherit. "Yes," he said. "Let's go home." They walked out together, leaving the chamber behind them. The galaxy they were stepping into was different from the one they had known. It was uncertain and unpredictable, and sometimes frightening, but it was also full of possibility, and humanity, as always, was ready to face whatever came next.